I rarely make Souls-like games video, so why don't we try it today? I'm gonna rank all Soulsborne games by their lore potential. Tier list, basically. Starting with the GOAT Elden Ring. Elden Ring stands out for its expansive world building. The collaboration with George R.R. Martin introduced a narrative depth that feels both familiar and fresh. What makes Elden Ring special is the freedom it offers. Unlike its predecessors, the open-world design allows for a non-linear storytelling experience. This approach respects the player's agency, encouraging exploration and discovery at their own pace. The game's lore is rich with themes of power, ambition, and the consequences of playing God. The Shattering, a cataclysmic event caused by the demigod's greed for the Elden Ring's power, sets the stage for a tale of restoration and redemption. Elden Ring's narrative is a masterpiece of show, don't tell. From the cryptic dialogues to the environmental storytelling, the game trusts players to delve into the lore without hand-holding. This level of trust is what elevates it to a tier for me. No doubt about that. Demon's Souls. So, Demon's Souls is like the first step into the Soulsborne universe. It's got this vibe where everything is kind of a secret, and you're like a detective in a dark, spooky world trying to figure out what's going on. The cool part is how it doesn't just tell you the story. You have to dig around for it, which feels like you're really earning those bits of lore. Now, why it's B tier for me is because, while it's got that awesome, mysterious feel, it's not as deep as what you get in the later games. It's like when you start a good TV series and the first season is solid, but you know it's just setting up for even better stuff later on. Demon's Souls gives you the basics, and it's great at that, but it doesn't go all out with crazy twists or super detailed backstories. It's the foundation that the other games build on to give you that mind-blowing lore that keeps you up at night thinking about it. So it's special because it started everything, and without it we wouldn't have the rest of the Soulsborne stories. But it's also just the appetizer before the main course of lore that comes in the other games. That's why it's in the B tier. It's good. Really good. But the other games are like the lore buffet, and Demon's Souls is more like the first dish that gets you ready for the feast. Still a very good game. No one can deny that. Next, Bloodborne. In my opinion, Bloodborne's lore is a masterpiece of storytelling that stands out even within the Soulsborne series, known for its deep and intricate narratives. The game's lore is rich with themes of cosmic horror and the frailty of humanity, set in a world that is both haunting and beautiful. Pure S tier. The game's setting, Yharnam, is a character in itself, with its gothic architecture and the ever-present sense of dread that permeates its streets. The lore delves into the hubris of mankind in seeking the eldritch truth and the consequences of meddling with forces beyond comprehension. The tragic tales of characters like Father Gascoigne and Lady Maria add a personal dimension to the overarching narrative of the hunt and the scourge of the beast. The concept of the Great Ones, and the idea that there is a higher reality just beyond human perception, is fascinating. It's not just about the horror of the unknown, but also the allure of it. The seductive quality of forbidden knowledge. This is reflected in the game's mechanics, where insight changes the player's experience of the game world. Bloodborne doesn't hand its story to you. It asks you to explore, to question, and to piece together the puzzle yourself. This active engagement with the lore is what makes it special. It's a game that respects the intelligence of its players and rewards curiosity with some of the most compelling storytelling in video games. Bloodborne's lore is S tier because it is a beautifully crafted tapestry of horror and mystery that invites players to lose themselves in its world. I feel it still doesn't get talked enough. Next, Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 holds a special place in the pantheon of Soulsborne games, primarily due to its deep and intricate lore. The game doesn't handhold the player through its narrative. Instead, it allows the lore to unfold through environmental storytelling, item descriptions, and dialogue with NPCs. What sets Dark Souls 1 apart is the way its lore is interwoven with the gameplay. The world of Lordran feels lived in, with a history that's both grand and tragic. The game's lore speaks of fallen heroes, ancient gods, and a curse that plagues humanity. It's a tale of cycles, of light and dark, and the inevitable decay of all things. This thematic richness adds layers of meaning to every location, enemy, and item in the game. However, the game's storytelling method can be a double-edged sword. For those who prefer a more direct narrative, Dark Souls 1's lore can seem opaque and fragmented. The game requires a significant investment of time and attention to understand its world fully, which can be off-putting for some players. Additionally, the game's age means that some of its lore has been expanded upon or retconned by its sequels and other games in the genre, which can lead to inconsistencies. Dark Souls 2. When it comes to the lore of the Soulsborne series, Dark Souls 2 sits in a peculiar spot. It's not that the game doesn't have a rich backstory or a complex world full of intriguing characters and legends. It's more about how it delivers that lore to the players. Firstly, Dark Souls 2 feels like it leans heavily on the legacy of its predecessors, particularly the original Dark Souls. While this creates a sense of nostalgia and provides a full-circle moment for fans, it also means that the game doesn't stand out with its own unique lore. Instead, it often feels like it's rehashing old tales, which can be seen as a lack of innovation in storytelling. Another point to consider is the way lore is presented in Dark Souls 2. The Soulsborne games are known for their show-don't-tell approach, leaving much to player interpretation. However, Dark Souls 3 sometimes falls short in this regard. There are moments where the lore feels too obscure, with crucial pieces of the story being easy to miss or requiring extensive outside research to fully understand. This can lead to a fragmented and unsatisfying lore experience for those who don't wish to delve into every nook and cranny or spend hours on community forums piecing together theories. Games' lore is often conveyed through item descriptions and environmental storytelling. While this method has its merits, it can also lead to a disjointed narrative where the player has to actively seek out the story rather than experiencing it organically through gameplay. This can make the lore feel like an afterthought rather than an integral part of the game. Next, Dark Souls 3. I think Dark Souls 3 is totally A-tier when it comes to the story stuff in the Souls games. It's like, the game doesn't just throw the story at you. You gotta dig around, check out the items, and chat with the characters to really get what's going on. I dig that because it feels like you're figuring out a mystery on your own. Plus, Dark Souls 3 wraps up a bunch of stories from the earlier games, which is pretty cool if you've been following along. It's like when a TV show has a really good finale that ties up all the loose ends. And the whole vibe of the game, with the world falling apart and everything starting over again, is super interesting. It's kind of like how you play the game, dying a bunch but getting back up and trying again. It makes the whole cycle thing they've got going on hit home. So yeah, I'd say Dark Souls 3 nails it with the lore. It's not just about tough fights. It's got a brainy side that makes you think and keeps you coming back for more. That's my take on it anyway. Sekiro. When it comes to the lore of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, I'd say it's a solid B tier when stacked against other Soulsborne games. The game's setting during the Sengoku period in Japan is rich with potential, and the central themes of immortality and the consequences of life and death are compelling. However, the lore doesn't quite reach the heights of its predecessors. One reason for this is the game's more straightforward narrative approach. Unlike the cryptic and deeply interconnected storytelling found in Dark Souls or Bloodborne, Sekiro opts for a more direct style. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but for fans who relish piecing together the lore from environmental clues and item descriptions, Sekiro might feel a bit lacking. The game's focus on a single protagonist, Wolf, and his quest to protect the Divine Heir does provide a strong central narrative thread. But this also means that the lore isn't as expansive or as open to interpretation as in other games from From Software. There's a certain depth that's missing, which is often found in the ambiguity and mystery of the lore in other Soulsborne titles. Plus, while the game does incorporate elements of Buddhist mythology and philosophy, it doesn't integrate these as seamlessly into the gameplay and world-building as the cosmic horror elements in Bloodborne or the medieval fantasy of Dark Souls. The lore feels more like a backdrop than an integral part of the game's identity. In terms of shortcomings, the game's lore sometimes feels secondary to the gameplay experience. The combat system and mechanics are where Sekiro truly shines, and while the lore is interesting, it doesn't always feel essential to the player's journey. This can leave those who play for the story feeling a bit underwhelmed. So while Sekiro Shadows Die Twice offers a unique and engaging narrative within the context of the Sengoku period, it doesn't quite capture the same level of lore depth and intrigue that has become a hallmark of the Soulsborne series. It's a great game in its own right, but when it comes to lore, it sits comfortably in the B tier. Rules are rules, so that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, make sure to subscribe. See you next time.